Welcome to another infographic instant with Brian Michael. In this episode, we'll be looking at how well has multilateral banking performed in the IGAD region. As you recall from the other infographics, the IGAD region, or the region covered by the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, consists mostly of lower income economies in East and Central Africa. Now, as a reminder of our previous videos, we looked at the performance of national development banks, and we saw that the performance of those banks in terms of returning a satisfactory rate of return on assets or equity was relatively good, but the outcomes that this development banking achieved were mixed. However, we have to then look at the outcomes of multilateral development banking in contrast to national development banking. And unfortunately, the World Bank is the only multilateral bank from which we can draw enough data in order to make any inferences about the effectiveness of multilateral development banking. In the course of the following figures, we'll be making some observations about World Bank lending in the IGAD region. Now, we don't mean to disparage the World Bank. In fact, we applaud the World Bank for providing publicly its own assessment data. Figure 7 tries to show the link between World Bank performance, as evaluated by the World Bank's own staff, and the development outcomes of projects done in the IGAD region, again, as assessed by bank staff. And what we see is a very non-coherent pattern in the data between projects with a high versus low performance and high versus low outcomes. On a scale from 1 to 6, where bank performance is worst for 0 and 6 for best, most of the projects tend to come in between a 2 to 4. However, the number of projects coming in at 0 is very remarkable. We would expect far less projects to earn the absolute lowest performance ranking than we see here. Similarly, we see that the development outcome of these different projects seems to have no relationship at all with the performance of the World Bank on that project. So again, turning our attention to the poorest performing projects, we see that many of them in fact achieved the highest possible development outcome, whereas we contrast that with projects that had relatively good performance, rating of 5, and we see that some of those had very poor outcomes indeed. Looking at figure 8, we see large differences in the performance of government, the bank, and supervision in these development projects in the IGAD region. We've divided up the performance of these various entities by country, and we show the data on the World Bank's own evaluation scale between 0 and 5. There's hardly any detectable pattern or correlation between government performance, bank performance, and the quality of supervision given to those projects. So given that we see such a wide dispersion in this performance and supervision, this might suggest the need for some kind of centralization or a targeted region-specific approach. As we often say as statisticians, it's not necessarily bad performance which is the problem, but it's the unpredictability or the variance in that performance which is particularly troubling, because then policies cannot be designed to target and improve that performance. Figure 9 then shows the link between the resources given to these various projects and their performance. And again, what we see is that there's no necessary relationship between the amount of lending or the size of the project and the bank's own evaluation of its performance from a scale of very bad to roughly translated as great. And it's this lack again of correlation which is particularly troubling. Big projects are not getting better performance than small projects. So stepping back and thinking about the overall conclusion from these figures, we clearly see the need for a new development banking model in this region. Simply repeating the old model of development banking in this region and expecting better outcomes is one definition of insanity. And in our paper, we hope to develop this new concept of development banking for this region. This has been another Infographic Instant with Brian Michael.